With a $20 billion inheritance on the line, a desperate tycoon offers $2 million to a cleaning lady with a mother battling cancer for a marriage of convenience. The contract is clear: a marriage on paper, separate lives. For 3 years, he ignores her. She studies and cares for her mother, but during a business crisis, her intelligence saves $50 million, and Damien, to his surprise, realizes he has fallen in love. The thought of losing her terrifies him. He courts her, but she, hurt by his indifference, believes it's manipulation. On divorce day, he publicly tears up the papers, renouncing the inheritance, and declares his true love. Watch this story to the end. You'll be amazed. If you love romance stories, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. Isabella Santos woke up at 5 in the morning, as she had done for the past 3 years. The alarm clock wasn't even necessary anymore. Her body had become accustomed to the routine that began before the sun even rose over Queens, New York. She got up slowly from the thin mattress she shared with her mother in their small 2-room apartment in Astoria, trying not to make any noise so as not to wake up Mrs. Carmen, who had finally managed to fall asleep after a difficult night. The reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a 28-year-old woman carrying the weight of responsibilities far greater than her age. Her brown eyes, inherited from her mother, still shone with determination, despite the dark circles that betrayed her sleepless nights. Isabella ran her hand through her straight brown hair, tying it into a simple bun that would last all day at work. She put on the navy blue uniform she knew so well, the blouse with the cleaning company logo embroidered on the left chest, and the pants that were already a bit faded from so much use. In her front pocket, she always carried the photo her mother had taken of her on graduation day 6 years ago. It was a silent reminder that this wasn't her life forever, just a necessary chapter. Before leaving, Isabella stopped in the tiny kitchen to leave her mother's medications separated next to a loving note. Mrs. Carmen was in her 4th round of chemotherapy, and the side effects seemed to worsen with each session. The anti-nausea medications cost a fortune, but Isabella always managed to buy them, even if it meant skipping a few meals. The walk to the bus stop took 15 minutes, and Isabella used this time to plan her day. Today was Tuesday, which meant she would be cleaning the offices on the upper floors of the Blackwell building, one of the most luxurious commercial buildings on 5th Avenue. It was ironic how well she knew every corner of those rooms, where millions of dollars in business were transacted every day, while she struggled to scrape together a few hundred at the end of the month. On the crowded bus, Isabella held on tight to the handrail and let her mind wander. She mentally calculated how much she still needed to pay off the medical debts that were piling up like an impossible mountain to climb: $500,000. The number haunted her every morning, but she had promised her mother that she would find a way. She always did. When the bus stopped in front of the imposing mirrored glass building, Isabella took a deep breath. Another day, another opportunity to get closer to her goal. She greeted the doorman, Mr. Tony, who always smiled at her kindly. He knew about the Santos family situation and often saved small extra cleaning jobs for Isabella on the weekends. The elevator took her to the 23rd floor, where the Blackwell Corporation's offices were located. Isabella knew the history of the company. She had read about it in business magazines during her spare time in college. A family dynasty that had built a real estate empire worth billions, run by men who had never had to worry about the price of milk or overdue utility bills. As she prepared the cleaning cart, Isabella watched the city stretch out to the horizon through the window. New York City woke up with her, each person chasing their dreams, their needs, their obligations. She was no different, just carrying a burden a little heavier than most. The first room she always cleaned belonged to some important executive. The walls covered with diplomas and awards, the polished mahogany desk, the leather sofa that cost more than Isabella's annual salary. She worked in silence, with precise and efficient movements developed over years of practice. Each piece of furniture was treated with the care she wished she could give to her own home. It was while polishing the desk that Isabella often allowed herself to dream. She imagined what it would be like to present her own ideas in that environment, what it would be like to be heard and respected for her intelligence, not just for the quality of her cleaning work. During college, she had excelled in investment analysis and strategic planning. Professors even suggested that she pursue a master's degree, but life had other plans. Mrs. Carmen's cancer diagnosis had changed everything overnight. Isabella dropped out of her last semester of college and dedicated herself entirely to caring for her mother and raising funds for treatment. Public health insurance covered the basics, but the most effective medications, specialized exams, additional care, all of that needed to be paid for separately. 3 years had passed since then, and Isabella had become an expert in performing miracles with numbers. She managed every penny with the precision of a financial executive, found promotions, negotiated installments, accepted extra work on weekends. Her schedule was meticulously organized: work in the morning, hospital in the afternoon when necessary, online studies at night when her mother was well, and always the search for opportunities. What hurt the most wasn't the physical exhaustion or the financial hardship. It was the loneliness. Isabella had lost contact with most of her college friends, who pursued prosperous careers while she cleaned offices. There was no time for relationships, for fun, for taking care of herself. Her life had become a sequence of responsibilities that she carried with dignity, but that weighed on her young shoulders. Even so, every morning, Isabella got up with the same determination. She knew that her situation was temporary, that each day of work brought her closer to a better future for herself and her mother. In her drawer at home, she kept her administration degree and some notes on business projects she had developed during sleepless nights. One day, she would return to the corporate world, but this time as a protagonist, not as an invisible person. As she finished organizing the first office and prepared to move on to the next, Isabella had no idea that her life was about to take a completely unexpected turn. It was shortly after 7 in the morning when Isabella heard raised voices coming from the main office. Normally, the executives didn't arrive until after 9, but today there was unusual activity on the 25th floor. She tried to ignore it, focusing on cleaning the meeting tables, but the tone of urgency in the conversations made her stop for a moment. "I need a solution by tomorrow, Marcus. The will's deadline cannot be extended," said a male voice that Isabella didn't recognize, filled with frustration and despair. "Damien, you know it's not that simple. Finding someone willing to enter a marriage of convenience in less than 24 hours is almost impossible," replied another voice, calmer, which Isabella knew belonged to the company's lawyer. Isabella tried not to listen, but the words "marriage of convenience" piqued her curiosity. She had read about such cases in novels and movies, but never imagined they happened in real life, especially in the business world that she only knew from afar. "Sophia cheated on me a week before the wedding, Marcus. A week! And now we discover she's been involved with my cousin Edward for months. All the planning, all the emotional investment." The voice broke for a moment. "I need this inheritance. It's not about the money. It's about honoring my grandfather's legacy. He always believed that a married man would be more responsible in business." Isabella knew this story from the business newspapers she read religiously. Damien Blackwell, heir to one of the largest real estate empires in the country, needed to get married before the age of 32 to have access to the full inheritance. The eccentricity had been the subject of speculation in the media for months, especially after the engagement with Sofia Mendonça, a well-known socialite, had been announced the previous year. Unintentionally, Isabella moved closer to the ajar door. She knew she was being indiscreet, but something about the vulnerability in that voice touched her deeply. It was strange to hear such a powerful man demonstrate such fragility. "What if we offered a significant financial compensation?" asked Marcus. $2 million up front, plus $100,000 a month for 3 years. After the period, automatic divorce with an additional $5 million in compensation. It's a generous proposal for any woman. Isabella felt her heart race. $7 million. It was exactly 14 times more than she needed to pay off all her mother's medical debts and still have enough left over to start over. It would be the solution to all her financial problems. But it was also completely unrealistic for someone like her. "It needs to be someone I can introduce to the family without raising suspicion," continued Damien. "An educated woman who knows how to behave at social events, but who also accepts the terms of the contract. No emotional involvement, no complications, just a business agreement." "Damien, you're talking about a fantasy. Women with that profile usually already have financial stability and wouldn't need such an agreement," Marcus countered. Isabella leaned against the wall, feeling her legs tremble. For a crazy moment, she imagined herself walking into that room and offering herself for the agreement. She had a college degree, she knew how to behave appropriately, and she certainly desperately needed the money. But it was an absurd fantasy. She was just a cleaning lady, invisible to men like Damien Blackwell. "So, what do you suggest? That I give up the inheritance and disappoint 3 generations of the family?" Damien's voice sounded bitter. "Perhaps we should broaden the range of possibilities," suggested Marcus hesitantly. "Look for women who, regardless of social class, have education and urgent financial need. What matters is that she is trustworthy and willing to honor the contract." Isabella felt as if the universe was conspiring in her favor or against her. She wasn't sure yet. She took a deep breath, thinking about her mother at home, the medications she needed to buy that week, the bills that were piling up. She also thought about her education, how she had always known how to adapt to different environments, how she had learned since childhood to observe and mimic behaviors. Before she could reconsider, Isabella knocked lightly on the door. "Excuse me," she said, entering the room with the cleaning cart. "Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to clean this room now, but I can come back later if you prefer." Damien Blackwell looked up at her for the first time. Isabella was surprised to see a man of approximately 30 years old, dark brown hair, slightly disheveled, blue eyes that showed deep weariness. He didn't correspond to the arrogant image she had created in her mind. He seemed younger, more human, more vulnerable. "No, you can stay. We were just finishing up," said Damien, running his hand through his hair. Isabella began to clean methodically, but her mind was working at an accelerated pace. She knew that this was probably her only chance to change not only her life, but her mother's life. Fear fought against hope in her chest. "Gentlemen," she said suddenly, surprising herself with her own courage, "I apologize, but I couldn't help but overhear part of the conversation. I know it may seem inappropriate of me, but I would like to apply for the position you are discussing." The silence in the room was deafening. Damien and Marcus stared at her, as if she had just spoken in an alien language. Isabella felt her face heat up, but she kept her posture upright. "I have a college degree in administration," she continued, her voice gaining firmness. "I've worked here for 3 years, and I know the family's reputation. I desperately need financial resources to cover my mother's medical treatment, and I can guarantee that I would honor every clause of the contract you establish." Damien stood up slowly, studying Isabella with an indefinable expression. She could almost hear his thoughts. How could a cleaning lady have the audacity to propose something like that? But there was something in his eyes that wasn't contempt. It was curiosity. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Isabella Santos," she replied, raising her chin with dignity. "Isabella Santos," repeated Damien, as if testing the name. "And are you sure about what you're offering to do?" Isabella looked directly into Damien Blackwell's eyes, feeling a mixture of terror and determination running through her veins. "I am absolutely sure, Mr. Blackwell. I understand exactly what is being proposed. A marriage of convenience with no emotional involvement, lasting 3 years. A purely business agreement. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably, clearly shocked by the situation. Damien, on the other hand, continued studying Isabella with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and empowered. "You said you have a degree in administration," said Damien, crossing his arms. "Where did you study?" "University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. I graduated 6 years ago, but I had to interrupt my career when my mother was diagnosed with cancer," Isabella replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And why should I trust someone I just met with something as important as my family inheritance?" Damien's question sounded more like genuine curiosity than a challenge. Isabella took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Because, Mr. Blackwell, I have more to lose than you do. If I break this agreement, I won't just lose money, I'll lose the only chance to save my mother's life. That makes me the most trustworthy person you could find." The silence stretched for long seconds. Marcus fidgeted nervously with the papers, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Damien paced the room, processing the unexpected proposal. "Marcus, could you give us a few minutes?" Damien asked finally. The lawyer left, not without casting a worried glance at Isabella. When they were alone, Damien approached her, but maintaining a respectful distance. "Tell me about your mother," he said, his voice softer than Isabella expected. "Mrs. Carmen is 54 years old. She was diagnosed 3 years ago with breast cancer. Treatment with our insurance is limited, so I work to pay for the additional medications and procedures." Isabella paused, swallowing the emotion. "The debts have already reached $500,000. Each month that passes, the amount increases and Her voice faltered for a moment. "I'm afraid I won't be able to manage anymore." Damien nodded slowly. "And you really believe you could pass as my wife? Social events, business dinners, public appearances?" "Mr. Blackwell, I've spent the last 3 years observing this world closely. I know how you talk, how you dress, how you behave. I can learn any necessary protocol." Isabella straightened her shoulders. "And I have something that many women in your social circle may not have. I really need this to work." Damien walked to the window, contemplating the city below. "The contract would be strict. You would live in the family mansion, but in a separate wing. We would maintain the appearance of a marriage for love, but our interaction would be minimal outside of mandatory events. No physical contact beyond what is necessary for photographs." "I understand perfectly," Isabella replied. "And you would continue working here. For the media and for my family, it would be the romantic story of a businessman who fell in love with a hard-working and honest woman, the modern fairy tale that everyone loves." Isabella felt a pang of irony. A fairy tale where the princess would continue scrubbing floors, but this time with a diamond ring on her finger. "There's one more thing," continued Damien. "Absolute secrecy. If you break the confidentiality of the agreement, the financial penalties will be severe. You would lose everything and still be left with a debt greater than the current one." "I understand," said Isabella. "And when would we start?" Damien turned to her, an almost amused expression on his face. "You're really doing this, aren't you? You're offering to marry a complete stranger." "Not a complete stranger," corrected Isabella. "I'm offering to make a business agreement with the heir to Blackwell Corporations, one of the most respected companies in the country. It's a calculated decision, not an impulsive one." For the first time since entering the room, Damien smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed his expression. "Isabella Santos, you are either very brave or completely crazy." "Probably a little of both," she admitted, allowing herself a small smile. Damien returned to the table and picked up the phone. "Marcus, can you come back, please?" When the lawyer returned, Damien announced, "We have our candidate." Marcus's eyes widened. "Damien, you can't be serious. She's intelligent, has genuine motives, adequate education, and is willing to honor a strict contract. Damien interrupted. Exactly what we need. In the following hours, Isabella found herself immersed in a whirlwind of legal documents, background checks, and term negotiations. Marcus, despite his initial reservations, proved to be professional, explaining each clause in detail. The contract was indeed strict. $2 million up front, $100,000 a month for 3 years, an additional $5 million at the end of the period. In return, Isabella committed to maintaining the appearance of a happy marriage, attending social events as needed, and maintaining absolute secrecy about the nature of the agreement. When she finally signed her name on the document, Isabella felt as if she were jumping off a cliff, not knowing if there was a lake or rocks below. The ceremony will be next Friday, informed Damien, also signing the papers. A small celebration, only close family. You'll have this week to prepare. Isabella nodded, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. And when do I move into the mansion? Saturday. My assistant Helena will contact you tomorrow to discuss the details. Damien paused. Isabella, I hope you know that despite the commercial nature of this agreement, we will treat you with respect. You are not an employee, at least not officially. Isabella picked up her copy of the contract, feeling the weight of the paper in her hands. Thank you, Damien. I can call you Damien, can't I? Of course, after all, in a few days, you'll be my wife. The word sounded strange coming from his lips. When Isabella finally left the building that afternoon, her life had changed completely. In her pocket, she carried the card from one of the most exclusive banks in the city and the promise that, by Friday, $2 million would be in her account. As she waited for the bus, she looked one last time at the Blackwell building. Tomorrow, she would return as a cleaning lady. Next week, she would return as Isabella Santos Blackwell. Life, she thought, definitely had a peculiar sense of humor. The first 6 months of Isabella's marriage passed like a strange and uncomfortable dream. The Blackwell mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, was larger than any place she had ever lived. But the wing she occupied felt like a gilded cage. Damien religiously fulfilled the terms of the contract, polite, distant, and absolutely indifferent to her presence. During the day, Isabella continued working as a cleaning lady in the building, a charade that became more difficult every morning. The other employees treated her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. How had a simple cleaning lady won the heart of New York's most coveted heir? She smiled and evaded the questions, inventing a romantic story about chance encounters and love at first sight. At night, she returned to the mansion where Damien greeted her formally during dinner when he was present. Most of the time, he worked late or had social engagements from which she was spared. Isabella dined alone in the dining room that seated 20 people, served by employees who treated her with the courtesy reserved for the mistress, but without genuine warmth. Isabella's mother had reacted with surprise and joy when she learned of the marriage. Mrs. Carmen, weakened by the treatments but with her eyes shining with hope, held her daughter's hands and said that she had always known that something wonderful would happen. Isabella smiled and agreed, keeping the truth about the agreement to herself. Seeing her mother in a private hospital, receiving the best treatment available, made every moment of loneliness worthwhile. But it was during a business dinner at the Plaza Hotel in New York City that everything began to fall apart. Isabella had carefully prepared for the event. An elegant navy blue dress, discreet makeup, the pearl earrings that Damien had given her to maintain appearances. She had studied the names of the guests, their companies, their interests, preparing as she always did to represent well the role of the loving wife. The dinner started well. Isabella chatted politely with the wives of the other businessmen, smiled at the right moments, and showed genuine interest in the businesses being discussed. Damien, by her side, perfectly played the role of the proud husband, holding her hand occasionally and giving her looks that seemed affectionate to the observers. That's when Sofia Mendonça appeared. Damien's ex-fiancée entered the room like an elegant storm, wearing a red dress that cost more than Isabella's annual salary as a cleaning lady. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and she walked with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. "Damien, darling," said Sophia, approaching the table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a surprise to find you here! And you must be the famous Isabella." Isabella felt all eyes turned to her. There was something in the way Sophia pronounced her name that made her feel like she was being stripped naked in public. "Sophia," replied Damien, his voice tense, "we weren't expecting to see you here." "Oh, Edward received a last-minute invitation," she said, referring to Damien's cousin with whom she had become involved. "You remember Edward, don't you?" Edward Blackwell appeared behind Sophia, a tall and attractive man who shared the family traits, but with a crueler smile. Isabella had heard about him, the younger cousin who had always lived in Damien's shadow, resentful for not having inherited the position of successor. "Cousin," said Edward, extending his hand to Damien, "and the beautiful Isabella. I must say, you exceeded our expectations, Damien. Who would have thought you'd find true love in—" "Where exactly did you work before, Isabella?" The silence at the table was heavy. Isabella felt her blood run cold. Edward knew. Not only did he know, but he was willing to use the information to humiliate her in public. "I worked in the service industry," replied Isabella carefully, trying to keep her voice steady. "Ah, yes, services," repeated Sophia with a venomous smile. "What specific area, darling? I'm always curious about how people meet." Isabella glanced quickly at Damien, who looked as tense as a rope about to break. She could see in his eyes that he had also realized the trap that was being set. "Isabella worked with corporate cleaning and maintenance," said Damien finally. Edward laughed, an unpleasant sound that echoed through the room. "Cleaning? How romantic! You literally swept my cousin off his feet, didn't you, Isabella?" The muffled laughter of some guests hit Isabella like slaps. She felt her face burn with humiliation, but forced a smile. "Love happens in the most unexpected places," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Certainly," agreed Sophia, "and it must be quite a change, isn't it? From cleaning offices to owning them. I bet you're learning a lot about the business world." "Sophia, that's enough," said Damien, his voice low but loaded with warning. "Oh, I didn't mean to offend," said Sophia with false innocence. "It's just that this whole story is so unusual. A modern fairy tale, really. The cleaning lady who marries the prince." She paused dramatically. "Of course, we all know the pressure you were under to get married before you turned 32, Damien. How lucky to find someone so convenient." The word convenient hung in the air like an accusation. Isabella saw the recognition in the eyes of some guests, the understanding that perhaps this marriage wasn't the romance it seemed to be. Edward leaned over the table, his smile becoming even crueler. "Tell me, Isabella, do you really believe Damien would have looked twice at you if he didn't desperately need a wife? A cleaning lady, let's face it." "Edward!" Damien's voice cut through the air like a whip, but the damage was done. Isabella could feel the whispers spreading around the table, the speculative glances, the discreet smiles. Her fairy tale love story had turned into a cruel joke before her eyes. "Excuse me," said Isabella, rising with all the dignity she could muster. "I need to use the restroom." She left the room with firm steps, but as soon as she reached the hallway, her legs buckled. She leaned against the wall, trying to breathe, trying to process what had just happened. All her insecurities, all the fears she had tried to suppress during the last few months, came to the surface like a devastating wave. Maybe Edward was right. Maybe she was just a convenience, a desperate solution to an urgent problem. Maybe she would never really belong to this world, no matter how hard she tried. Isabella had been in the hallway for only a few minutes when she heard footsteps approaching. She prepared herself to face Damien, or worse, Sophia coming to deliver the final blow. Instead, an elegant woman of approximately 60 years old appeared, with impeccably styled grey hair and gentle eyes. "You must be Isabella," said the woman with a warm smile. I'm Helena Blackwell, Damien's aunt. I hope you don't mind that I came after you. Isabella tried to compose herself quickly. Mrs. Blackwell, You were recovering from a completely unnecessary and cruel attack, Helena interrupted. May I call you Isabella? And please, just call me Helena. There was something in Helena's voice that was different from the coldness that Isabella had encountered in the Blackwell family until then. It was genuine, warm, almost maternal. I witnessed what happened in there, continued Helena, approaching. Edward has always been a bitter and envious boy. As for Sophia, well, a woman who cheats on a man a week before the wedding has no moral ground to judge anyone. Isabella felt tears burning in her eyes. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong in this world. Helena studied Isabella carefully, as if she were seeing something that others couldn't see. May I tell you a story? Isabella nodded, grateful for the distraction. 40 years ago, I was just an elementary school teacher from upstate New York. I came from a humble family. My father was a mechanic, my mother a seamstress. When I met Robert Blackwell, Damien's father's older brother, everyone said it was crazy. A poor teacher with one of the richest men in the state? Helena smiled fondly at the memory. His family hated me. They said I was a gold digger, that I was trying to take advantage of the family fortune. Robert faced tremendous pressure to end our relationship. What happened? Asked Isabella, genuinely curious. Robert defended me, but that wasn't what won over the family. Helena paused significantly. It was when the company went through a terrible crisis. A recession that almost led them to bankruptcy. Robert was desperate, working day and night, but traditional solutions didn't work. That's when I suggested something that none of the executives had thought of. Isabella leaned forward, interested. I proposed that they invest in affordable housing. At the time, no one in the luxury real estate market wanted to stoop to building for the working class. But I knew that population. I knew their needs, their dreams of owning a home. Helena smiled. My suggestion not only saved the company from bankruptcy, but opened up a completely new market. Blackwell Corporations became a leader in affordable housing, multiplying profits. Isabella felt a strange connection to the story, and the family accepted you after that. More than that, they realized that I brought a perspective that they would never have. My humble background wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. I understood things that they, isolated in their wealth, could never comprehend. Helena gently held Isabella's arm. Darling, you have something that these women like Sophia will never have. You know real life. You know the value of honest work, of struggle, of perseverance. That's not a reason for shame. It's your greatest asset. But I'm just a cleaning lady, murmured Isabella. No, you're not. You're a woman with a degree in administration who sacrificed her career to care for her mother. A woman who had the courage to propose a daring agreement to save someone she loves. A woman who, despite being in a hostile environment, maintains her dignity and intelligence. Helena smiled. Robert has told me about you. He's impressed with your observations during family meetings. Isabella blinked, surprised. I didn't know he paid attention. Darling, you underestimate your own impact. Last week, when you commented on the need to diversify the company's portfolio to include sustainable projects, Robert spent 2 days researching the subject. Your ideas are valuable. For the first time in months, Isabella felt a spark of hope. But Damien, he barely talks to me. To him, I'm just part of a business agreement. Helena hesitated for a moment, as if she were deciding how much to reveal. Isabella, may I tell you something in confidence? Isabella nodded. Damien is confused, very confused. Helena lowered her voice. He expected this marriage to be simple, a cold agreement without complications, but you're affecting him in ways he didn't expect. How so? Robert has noticed changes in his behavior. Damien has cancelled several social gatherings in recent months, gatherings that were previously important to him. He asks about you when you're not present at family dinners. And last week, Helena stopped as if she had said too much. "Last week, what?" insisted Isabella. "He was seen buying flowers at the farmer's market. Simple flowers, not the expensive arrangements he used to order for his other companions. Robert said he had never seen Damien choose flowers personally." Isabella felt her heart race. "But he never gave me flowers." "No, he didn't, and that's precisely the problem." Helena smiled wisely. "My dear, Damien is fighting against something that wasn't foreseen in your contract, genuine feelings, and it's terrifying him." At this moment, Damien appeared in the hallway, clearly looking for Isabella. When he saw them talking, his expression became even more tense. "Isabella, we need to get back. People are asking where you are," he said, but his gaze turned questioningly to Helena. "Of course," replied Isabella, feeling suddenly stronger. "Aunt Helena was just telling me interesting stories about the family." Helena gave an encouraging squeeze to Isabella's arm. "Remember what we talked about, dear. You have more power than you imagine." When they returned to the ballroom, Isabella walked differently. She still felt the pain of humiliation, but now she also carried something new, the understanding that her story in the Blackwell family was just beginning, and that perhaps, just perhaps, she had more control over her destiny than she had realized. 2.5 years had passed since the wedding, and Isabella felt as if she were living in two parallel realities. During the day, she continued her work as a cleaning lady, now observing everything with different eyes, absorbing information about the company's operations with a unique perspective. At night, she attended family dinners, where her opinions were increasingly requested and respected, especially by Uncle Robert. Her mother had been in complete remission for 6 months, a miracle that Isabella attributed to the top-notch treatment she had finally been able to afford. Mrs. Carmen had moved into a comfortable apartment near the hospital, where she had regular checkups. And for the first time in years, Isabella could sleep without worrying about medical bills. But something was wrong with Damien. In recent months, Isabella had noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He watched her during dinners with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. His responses became shorter, almost rude, and he seemed to avoid her purposefully. When they needed to appear together at public events, he played the role perfectly. But Isabella felt a new tension between them, as if he were fighting against some invisible force. On Thursday night, 3 months before the end of the contract, Isabella was in her room when she heard raised voices coming from Damien's study. She had learned over the years that the walls of the mansion were thinner than they seemed, and she immediately recognized Edward's voice. "You're making a terrible mistake, cousin," said Edward. "Everyone knows this marriage is a sham. Why don't you just end it and marry someone suitable?" "My marriage is none of your business," replied Damien, his voice laden with irritation. "Don't be naive, Damien. Do you think no one notices? The way you look at her has changed. You're falling for a cleaning lady." Edward laughed cruelly. "The heir to the Blackwell dynasty losing his mind over a woman who earns less in a year than you spend in a weekend." Isabella felt like she had been punched in the stomach. She knew that Edward was cruel, but hearing her background being used as an insult still hurt deeply. "Edward, you have 5 seconds to get out of my house before I do something we might both regret," said Damien, his voice dangerously low. "Wake up, cousin. She's manipulating you. Do you think it's a coincidence that she appeared just when you needed her most? That she has all the right answers at family meetings? She studied you. She studied the family. She's a clever opportunist." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella held her breath, hoping that Damien would defend her honor, that he would refute his cousin's cruel accusations. Instead, she heard Damien's voice, low and full of doubt. "Sometimes I wonder the same thing." The words hit Isabella like an avalanche. She backed away from the door, stumbling to her bed, feeling as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. After 2.5 years living in that house, sharing meals, conversations, moments of apparent genuine connection, Damien still doubted her intentions. Throughout the night, Isabella couldn't sleep. Edward's words and, worse, Damien's silent agreement echoed in her mind. She got up and walked to the window, looking at the impeccable gardens of the mansion. For a moment, she tried to imagine herself staying there forever, constantly fighting to prove her worth, her sincerity, her dignity. The realization came like a lightning bolt. She was tired, exhausted from living a lie, from pretending that she didn't care about Damien's coldness, from pretending that she hadn't developed feelings for a man who saw her only as a clever opportunist. Because the truth, which Isabella finally admitted to herself that lonely night, was that she had fallen in love with Damien Blackwell. Not for the money, not for the security he provided, but for the man she had observed in unguarded moments. The man who treated the mansion staff with respect, who secretly visited the company's social projects, whom she had once found in the garden feeding an injured cat. But that same man doubted her basic intentions of human decency. On Friday morning, Isabella made a decision. She typed a simple resignation letter and left it on the desk of Mr. Tony, the doorman who had become a friend over the years. She could no longer continue working in the building, pretending normality while her world crumbled. During lunch, she called Helena, the only person in the Blackwell family who treated her with genuine affection. "Helena, I need to tell you something," said Isabella, her voice trembling. "I'm leaving." "What, darling, what happened?" Isabella told her about the conversation she had overheard, about Damien's doubt, about how she felt exhausted from fighting for a place in a world that might never truly accept her. "Isabella, you can't give up now," said Helena, her voice full of concern. "There are only 3 months left until the end of the contract, and I can guarantee that Damien feels more for you than he admits." "It doesn't matter what he feels," replied Isabella, tears running down her face. "If after 2.5 years he still believes that I'm an opportunist, then he has never truly known me. And I can't live like that anymore, Helena. I can't pretend that I don't care." That night, at the family dinner, Isabella was silent. When Robert asked for her opinion on a new project, she simply said that she had no comments to make. Damien watched her strangely, but said nothing. After dinner, as Isabella prepared to go up to her room, Damien called her. "Isabella, are you okay? You seem distant." She turned to him, and for a moment all the pain and frustration that had accumulated threatened to explode. Instead, she simply said, "I'm tired, Damien, very tired." "Tired of what?" Isabella looked into the blue eyes that had become so familiar, so dear, and whispered, "Of pretending." She climbed the stairs without looking back, leaving Damien alone in the room with a confused expression and something that looked like despair beginning to form in his eyes. Isabella spent the weekend in silence, packing her bags discreetly and organizing her thoughts. She had decided to leave the following Monday, 3 months before the deadline stipulated in the contract. She knew that this would mean giving up the final $5 million, but her dignity was worth more than any amount. On Monday morning, instead of going to work, Isabella went to Marcus's office to officially communicate her decision. The lawyer received her with visible surprise and concern. "Isabella, are you sure about this? There are only 12 weeks left. You're giving up a fortune," said Marcus, flipping through the contract. "I'm sure," replied Isabella, her voice firm despite her broken heart. "I would like the divorce to be processed as quickly as possible. I maintain the secrecy about the terms of the agreement, as agreed, but I can't continue anymore." "May I ask why? Did Damien do something?" "Damien didn't do anything," interrupted Isabella. "That's precisely the point. After 2.5 years, we're still complete strangers. He doesn't trust me, and I can't pretend it doesn't affect me anymore." Marcus watched her carefully. "Isabella, can I tell you something off the record?" She nodded. "Damien came to me last week. He wanted to know if there was any legal way to extend the contract beyond 3 years. Isabella felt her heart race, but forced herself to maintain a neutral expression. "And is there?" "Technically, a new agreement would be necessary with the consent of both parties." Marcus paused. Isabella, a man doesn't seek to extend a marriage of convenience unless he wants to maintain appearances for longer, Isabella concluded bitterly. Maybe he realized that it's convenient to have a wife who doesn't interfere in his personal life. Or maybe, said Marcus gently, he realized that he doesn't want you to leave. Isabella stood up, determined not to let herself be affected by empty hopes. Please process the divorce. I'll leave a letter for Damien at the mansion and leave this afternoon. When she arrived home, Isabella found the mansion strangely silent. Damien had left for a business trip that would last 3 days, a perfect opportunity for her to leave without unnecessary confrontations. She sat at the desk in the study and began to write the most difficult letter of her life. Damien, when I accepted your proposal 2.5 years ago, I thought it would be the hardest thing I had ever done. I was wrong. Leaving is infinitely more difficult. I want you to know that I honored every clause of our contract. I maintained secrecy, played my part in public, and tried my best not to interfere in your life. But there is something that wasn't foreseen in the agreement, the fact that I would become a different person during this time. I'm not just talking about the expensive dresses or the social events. I'm talking about discovering a version of myself that I didn't know. A woman who has valuable opinions about business, who can contribute significantly to important decisions, who deserves to be heard and respected. During these years, I observed you more than I should have. I saw your dedication to work, your genuine concern for the employees, your struggle to balance family tradition with innovation. I learned to admire you not only as a businessman, but as a person. But I also realized that, for you, I remain exactly what I was on the first day, a convenient solution to an urgent problem. After all this time, you still question my motivations. You still doubt the sincerity of my contributions. I can't live like that anymore. I can't wake up every day in a house where I'm treated like a polite stranger. I can't pretend that I don't care about your opinion of me. I'm leaving today because I discovered something that wasn't foreseen in our agreement. I discovered my own worth, and that worth doesn't allow me to remain in a place where I'm not truly welcome, no matter how much money is involved. Don't worry about the legal aspects. Marcus is taking care of everything, and I will maintain absolute secrecy about our agreement. Your reputation and inheritance are safe. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to save my mother and discover who I really am. I only regret that we never had the chance to truly know each other. Isabella. She sealed the letter and left it on Damien's desk. Then she gathered her few personal possessions. She had arrived at that house with almost nothing and would leave in the same way. The expensive clothes, the jewelry, everything would remain there. She would only take what was truly hers. However, before leaving, Isabella made a final decision. She went to Robert's office at the company headquarters. If she was leaving, she would make one last contribution. "Uncle Robert," she said, entering the room after the secretary announced her arrival. "I need to talk to you." Robert greeted her with his usual affection, but Isabella could see the concern in his eyes. "Isabella, Damien called me desperate. He found out that you filed for divorce. What's going on?" "It's a decision that's been made," said Isabella firmly. "But before I leave, I want to give you something." She placed a folder with dozens of handwritten pages on the table. "During these years, I observed the company from a unique perspective. I developed a complete project for a social responsibility program that could revolutionize the way Blackwell relates to the community." Robert opened the folder, his eyes widening as he read. "Isabella, this is extraordinary. The detail, the economic viability, the social impact. Where did you learn to do something like this?" "I learned by observing, studying, and mainly remembering where I came from," replied Isabella. "This project can be my farewell gift to the family that welcomed me, even if temporarily." Robert watched her intently. "Isabella, you can't leave, not now. Damien needs to see this. The company needs you." "The company has survived decades without me," said Isabella, standing up. "And Damien, Damien never truly saw me. It's better this way. She headed for the door, but Robert called her once more. Isabella, I can guarantee you one thing. When Damien finds out you're gone, he'll realize exactly what he lost. The question is whether it will be too late. Isabella smiled sadly. Maybe some lessons can only be learned through loss, Uncle Robert. Take care. She left the building for the last time, feeling the weight of a lifetime changing direction. In a few hours, Damien would return from his trip to find an empty house and a letter that would change everything between them forever. Damien arrived from his trip on Thursday night, exhausted after 3 days of tense meetings in Washington, D.C. The mansion was strangely silent when he entered, but he initially attributed it to the fact that Isabella was probably already asleep. It was only when he went up to his study that he found the letter on his desk. His hands trembled as he read each word. Isabella had left, really left. And worse, she had left believing that he saw her only as a convenient solution. Her words echoed in his mind like a punch to the gut. You still question my motivations. You still doubt the sincerity of my contributions. Damien let himself fall into the chair, the letter falling from his hands. During the last few months, he had fought against feelings he didn't understand, an attraction and admiration that grew with each passing day. Isabella wasn't just intelligent, she was brilliant. Her observations about business were always accurate, her suggestions innovative. More than that, she had a humanity that he had never found in his social circle. But Edward was right about one thing. Damien had fallen in love. And that terrified him because it wasn't foreseen in the contract, because it meant vulnerability, because it meant that he needed her in a way that went far beyond the original agreement. On Friday morning, Damien stormed into Marcus's office like a hurricane. "Where is she?" he demanded without greetings. "Damien," she specifically asked. "Marcus, where is Isabella? I need to talk to her." The lawyer sighed. She rented a small apartment in Astoria near her mother. But Damien, she was very clear. Damien had already left, leaving Marcus talking to himself. Isabella's apartment was modest, a stark contrast to the mansion where she had lived for 2.5 years. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, her expression hardened. "Damien, there's nothing to talk about," she said, trying to close the door. He placed his hand on the door, preventing it from closing. "Isabella, please, I need to explain." "Explain what?" "That after 2.5 years, you still believe I'm an opportunist, that my contributions are calculated, that I studied the family to manipulate you." "No." The word came out with more force than Damien intended. "Isabella, you don't understand. I never doubted your sincerity. I doubted myself." Isabella stopped, confused. "What are you talking about? Can I come in, please?" Reluctantly, she opened the door. The apartment was small but cozy, decorated with simplicity and affection. Damien immediately felt out of place in his expensive suit in that genuine environment. "Isabella, you want to know the truth? I cancelled all my dates more than a year ago. I stopped seeing other women because I couldn't stop thinking about you." Damien ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling with the words. "When Edward said those cruel things, when I agreed, it wasn't because I doubted you. It was because I was afraid of what I was feeling." "Afraid?" Isabella sat on the sofa, her expression still cautious. "Afraid of having fallen in love with a woman who was with me only by contractual obligation. Afraid that when the 3 years were up, you would leave without looking back, because I had never meant anything to you other than a bill payer." Isabella stared at him in silence for long seconds. "You fell in love with me?" "Madly," admitted Damien, sitting in the armchair in front of her. "Every day that passed, you became more impressive. Your intelligence, your dedication to your family, the caring way you treated the staff, your brilliant ideas about business. I fell in love with all of that and with you. Then why did you never say anything? Why did you continue treating me like a stranger?" Because I was afraid of violating our agreement. You made it very clear from the beginning that this was just business. I didn't want to put you in an uncomfortable position or make you feel like you needed to feign feelings you didn't have. Isabella stood up and walked to the window. Damien, you're an idiot. He blinked, surprised. A complete idiot, she continued, turning to him. Because if you had paid attention, really paid attention, you would have realized that I also fell in love with you. More than a year ago, the world stopped for Damien. You... what? I fell in love with the man I saw taking care of that injured cat in the garden, with the man who knows the name of every employee in the company, with the man who secretly visits the social projects and genuinely cares about the company's impact on the community. Isabella approached him. I fell in love with you, Damien Blackwell, not with your bank account. Damien stood up, hope blossoming in his chest. Isabella, but that doesn't change the fact that you didn't trust me enough to tell me about your feelings. It doesn't change the fact that you preferred to believe that I was capable of manipulation. You're right, admitted Damien. I was a coward, but Isabella, I want a chance to fix this. I want a chance to know you truly, without contracts, without agreements, just us two. And how can I be sure that you see me as your equal? That I'm not just the cleaning lady who got lucky? In response, Damien pulled a paper from his pocket. It was a copy of the project that Isabella had left with Robert. My uncle showed me this yesterday. Isabella, this project is genius, revolutionary, and he wants to implement it immediately. Damien held her hands. But more than that, he wants to offer you the position of Director of Social Responsibility for the company, a position created specifically for your unique skills. Isabella's eyes widened. He can't be serious. He is, and I'm also serious when I say that I want you in my life, not as a contractual wife, but as a partner, in business and in life. Isabella looked into Damien's blue eyes and saw for the first time complete vulnerability. There were no masks, no business agreements, just a man in love asking for a second chance. Damien, she said softly, if we're going to try this for real, it has to be as equals. No games, no hiding feelings, no fear. As equals, he agreed, bringing her hand to his lips. Isabella Santos, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? A real date, not a contractual obligation. She smiled, the first genuine smile in days. I would love to. 6 months later, Isabella and Damien remarried, this time in a simple ceremony in the garden of the mansion, with only close family and a few dear friends. Isabella wore a simple dress and carried a bouquet of flowers from the farmer's market, the same flowers that Damien had bought but had never had the courage to give her. As Director of Social Responsibility for Blackwell Corporations, Isabella implemented programs that became a national model. The company created a support fund for families in medical emergencies, exactly like the one she herself had faced. Mrs. Carmen, completely recovered, became a grandmother to twins 2 years later, and often said that she knew from the first day that Damien and Isabella were destined for each other. Sometimes, when Isabella passed through the corridors of the company where it all began, she smiled, remembering the courageous woman who had once offered herself for an impossible agreement. That woman had found much more than financial salvation. She had found her true worth, her voice, and a love that had grown not from convenience, but from admiration, respect, and time. Dear listeners, we hope that Isabella's journey has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. To continue this emotional journey through stories that celebrate the strength of true love and overcoming adversity, we have prepared a special selection of equally captivating narratives. You can find them by clicking on the icon to your left. If Isabella's story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Every gesture encourages us to continue sharing these stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life. Every day, we bring new and unique content that shows how love can blossom in the most unexpected places. Don't miss our next stories, and we look forward to seeing you in the comments telling us how this narrative made you feel. Until the next emotional adventure.